Haidete o Filoi. I'm Fletcher from amindforlanguage.com, and you're listening to Greeking Out, a podcast for ancient and Koine Greek learners full of tools, tips, and possibly tirades on learning Greek using comprehension-based methods. If that isn't familiar to you, check out episode 0, The Manifesto, for more info. In this episode, I'm talking with Rogelio Toledo, who along with Jenny Teichmann ran Triodos Trivium. Rogelio and Jenny decided to close Triodos Trivium at the end of last year, so I thought I'd find out what they're up to now. Rogelio and I talk about his new initiatives for teaching Greek and encouraging comprehensible-based input methods for Greek studies. We talk about Byzantine materials and how they may have the potential to help us bridge the gap to more difficult material from the classical period or Homeric period. Rogelio is currently working on his PhD and also has a number of very interesting projects going on that you can find out more about on his website, as well as the classes he's offering. So, without further ado, let's jump in. Hi, Rogelio. It's good to have you back on the podcast. I understand some things have changed for you since we talked with you and Jenny last. So, do you want to just tell me briefly what's going on in your world?
Yeah, hi, thanks. I'm starting a new project called Rogelus Byzantinus. I have different ideas that I want to do there. But yeah, Triodos stopped being. I decided to dissolve the organization, and now I'll be working on my own, and Jenny will have her own projects also.
Okay.
Yeah. Regarding the projects, I'll be having reading groups and classes. I won't be able to teach as much as I used to because of the PhD.
Okay.
But I'll be working with other friends and colleagues and giving them the opportunity also to teach through my platform.
Cool. Yeah, I see, looking at your new website, you have a lot of different things going on there. So I see some events, summer school, podcasts too coming out, or audio library.
Yeah. That's one of the projects I'm most excited about. It's going to be audio library. The name comes from one book by Photius. He was a patriarch of Constantinople in the 9th century, and he wrote a book called The Library. But every entry of this book is like a big compilation of everything he read. He wrote it for his brother, I think. Every entry starts with anagnosti, me. Like, it was read to me. There's some debate of what this anagnosti me means. If it means that he was actually just seated and someone was reading out loud, or it can be also, according to the grammar, to Greek grammar, can be also one way of saying like I read, but because of this aorist passive form, it's not clear. But
okay.
What comes from there. Byzantines were also learning a lot by hearing. They were not just like a book culture. A lot of the was done. Because not everyone could afford to have a book. So a lot of the learning was done orally. So that's one idea that I have, doing this library. I'm talking to different professors or colleagues from the university or different universities to read out loud one of their favorite passages in Byzantine literature.
Hmm.
in the original language. And then in addition to that, I'll have um, the text with the text prepared like in this kind of Urbera style with the comprehensible input and some grammatical explanations and so on. So that's my idea. So which also, as I mentioned, one way of bringing together two different, or well, the institutions on one hand, like universities, and people outside institutions that are learning Greek as in this communicative way,
Hmm.
because I think they're a bit disconnected, and that's really a pity. I mean, I think the future of Greek and Latin has to be through these methods that we're doing, and universities are just not aware of that. And all the people that are interested, they just think that Greek and Latin are going to disappear because
Hmm.
they don't know that what you and I don't know, like people all around the world are interested in learning this way, but not their way of grammar translation. So that's one idea that I have.
Let-
Um,
So, so it looks like from your website, your focus is on the Byzantine period of Greek. Um, I know most of us, probably most of the people who listen to this, they're focused on, say, the biblical period, New Testament or Septuagint, or they're focused on like the classical, like Attic or Homeric period. So, how different is Byzantine Greek from, say, Koine, and then again from Attic or Homeric?
yeah, that's a good question. And also, I mean, the I decided to go for that name of Byzantine Greek because at the end, I think um, it can encompass all these different um, varieties of Greek. I mean,
Hmm,
there were writers who wrote like imitating Homeric Greek. I mean,
right.
to a better or lesser degree. There are writers who wrote like imitating Demosthenes or Plato, or and there are also other writers who wrote already like in the vernacular form, which is closer to modern Greek. My idea for this new project is mostly writers who imitate or who write using an atticizing form of
Okay.
Greek. Yeah. Um, Also, I mean, for people interested in Koine Greek, I think, I mean, most of the church fathers already, I mean, use this precisely this atticizing form. It was no longer the form that was spoken, but they were already like cultivated, and they want to also to show that they could write as good as Demosthenes or as good as Isocrates,
Hmm.
but I mean on other topics.
So,
I say that what they are using is an atticizing form of Greek. In either we can call it like late antiquity or Byzantine times, but the language I would call it atticizing Greek.
okay. So if someone were already, maybe they already read Plato, or they were familiar with some more Attic Greek, they'd still feel fairly comfortable reading the Byzantine, some of these later Byzantine writers. They'd see things that are familiar. Is that sound like a fair assessment of what you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Usually there are certain things. For example, I think I'm reading right now Pselos. Um, he was like a very important philosopher of the 11th century, and there's a certain tendency for using like I don't know, they use the perfect more in places where we would expect the aorist, because these forms were not were merged and were like kind of artificial. So
Mm,
there are certain things like that mm, for someone who's used to pure Attic Greek would like be a bit weird.
mm,
But in any case, during this text that I'm preparing, I would write a note on the side and saying like in this is perhaps already a Byzantinism, let's say. Or
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think from what I've read, we see the aorist and the perfects like shift meaning throughout from the Homeric up to the biblical period too. So there's already some, if
Mhm.
you're, I guess if someone's already reading widely within the older, more ancient Greek, they would see, they'd be used to these things. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
that's,
Yeah, and also, I mean, depends. Also, when I'm reading even Plato, and I wonder sometimes like why. I mean, and there's one passage in Plato where he said he Socrates was dying. I was expecting like you were present the day Socrates was dying, and I was expecting there an hour in the sense of the day Socrates died. But Plato used the imperfect.
uh,
So also there are these things that perhaps because I'm thinking in, I mean, my native language is Spanish, so there are always these kind of things that on aorist and perfect that are not as one could expect as much as you have read or regardless of how much you might have read. Yeah.
there's there's a lot of really interesting research I read on those mismatches of imperfect and things, and how do we interpret the semantics of these different verbal forms. I wish I could remember the papers, but it was a Corey and Barry, I think, and a number of others out of the Netherlands and some of the Northern European countries had done a bunch of research on this, and it was really
Mhm.
interesting. Like, oh, okay, well, how do we handle the fact we have an aorist, but then we have we have an aorist verb, but then there's a adverb like always in it. So how do we take something that's usually refers to a point in time and spread it out
Mhm.
over a long period? And
Yeah.
that was really interesting to
Yeah.
think about
Yeah.
some of those things.
That's yeah. Send me later the article because those are the questions that, for example, when I'm teaching and one student asks, is like, well, what can I say? The only thing I can say is it's written like this, and therefore we need to say that it's correct. I mean, the grammar might say something else, but the fact is that the writer who knew the language and spoke the language wrote it like this. So, but
Yeah, the
mhm.
term I think was aspect coercion. That's what they call it. How they're
Okay.
using parts, other things in the sentence to coerce the usual meaning of the aspect into communicate something different. I think that's what was sort of the idea. It forces us to reinterpret the
Yeah,
verb in light of the rest of the sentence. So it was interesting stuff.
yeah, yeah. Send me the article.
Yeah, I'll have to do that. Um,
Yeah.
so
Um. Yeah.
so you're seeing, um, so you're seeing that maybe these Byzantine texts. I'm assuming there's quite a lot of them, and these would be really good comprehensible input. Is that kind of the gist I'm getting?
Yeah, that's also um one other aspect I would like to stress that we are used to. I mean, mostly we start learning Greek and Latin because we have this. The first we come to know is like the classical past,
Yeah.
and um, so we start reading those texts, but I've found that Byzantine texts that I mean they all also wanted to read the ancient text, but they created something in between.
Mm,
They have like many didactic literature they created in order to get to those texts. So I think we can. It would be worth take a look on what they did and see what can we apply for us because we cannot like apply them completely. We don't speak medieval vernacular version of Greek. We speak Spanish, English, German, French. So we cannot like completely just take them because sometimes the explanation they give for a certain Homeric word would be like a vernacular form of,
mm.
uh, of medieval Greek. But uh, in general, I think the didactic methods they use would be really could be very well applied to. to what we're doing as comprehensible input. For example, they have poems on grammar. They imitate the iambic verses, but explaining the grammar. Or you need to memorize, or you need to have an idea of what happens in the Old Testament, in case you don't know. So there's more like one didactic poem on the Old Testament in iambic verses with simple language,
Huh.
and or things like that. And the topics can be like quite different. There are on medicine, on Homer, on the Psalms. Yeah.
That it's interesting. I read a post by I think Scott Young, one of his emails or something, and he was saying that there's research that says you're like the best predictor of how quickly someone can learn something is how much background information they have going into it.
Mhm.
And like there's research that says with kids, like it's not really there's not necessarily really any difference in innate ability. It's really how much does someone know already.
Mhm.
And that was the best predictor of speed at learning. So this kind of sounds like what you're saying is this some of this Byzantine texts are sort of a step closer to us in terms of content. And so like it if we wanted to get to I mean obviously if you come out of a class and read Plato you could just go straight there, but this might be an intermediate step that helps us build some of that background knowledge in a simpler and more easy to understand way that'll let us get to reading Plato more easily. Is that kind of what
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
getting?
exactly, exactly. Yeah. I mean, and there are like different ways of they paraphrase
Hmm.
the text or they present it in a different way. So, for example, of the Psalms, there's one version of the Psalms written in Homeric Greek, but there's another version written in iambic verses. So I think
Interesting.
for example, depends on what you want to do. Perhaps you want to read Homer, but you already know the Psalms. So that would be like one intermediate step to go read Homer. Like, okay, I know the content of the Psalms, but I'm not used to the Homeric form. So I'll read this and then I'll get the how I'll understand how the hexameter works, and then I can start reading Homer. But I need to start from something that I already know.
That's
Hmm.
that's really interesting. I wish I could remember the name of the grammar, but there's a modern Homeric grammar that they're the example sentences at the end are often adaptations from other things, including like the New Testament and I guess Plato, but done in a Homeric style. So it's interesting that the Byzantines were doing that hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Exactly. Yeah, I read with a couple of friends. There's one epic version of the Gospel of John. It's like an amazing text.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
I, I'd love
I
to
mean,
read that. I'll have to hunt it down.
what? I beg your
I,
pardon?
I would love to read that. I'll have to hunt it down someday. I think that would be
Yeah,
interesting.
I can send you the because you can read both. I mean, the it's in the Teubner edition, so you find it on archive.org,
Okay.
and you can use it like a very good input method because you have the original text of John and then the Homeric paraphrase. So you can learn like how do you say like in a what you know already in Koine, you can learn how to say it like in Homeric Greek. And
Well, that's great because I started out in biblical Greek, right? Reading the New Testament. And so every time I've tried to step beyond that, it's always been, it's always been difficult. And I think it's primarily for vocabulary reasons
Mhm,
because, Plato and Homer have a complete, not completely different, but they have quite a different vocabulary because they're talking about different things. But sometimes it's grammar, but oftentimes it's vocab.
mhm,
Um, but still, just being able to say, okay, well, here's something I know well
mhm.
versus the differences for Homer would be really, really helpful.
Yeah, yeah, I think I mean, more experimentation is needed. So far, it's just my experience reading it and the thing that I've talked with friends or colleagues or students about this, but I think it would be really worthwhile looking into listening texts as comprehensible input.
Yeah, and like you said with poetry, that has a way to stick in our minds
Exactly.
because of the rhythm and things. That sounds really helpful too. Um,
Yeah.
so hey, so you've got some other things going on. You sent me a few other notes. So you have a summer school coming up this year, is that right?
Yeah, that's right. With my friend Jenny Glazer, she's a PhD candidate at I'm not sure if I'll pronounce it correctly, Bryn Mawr.
Yeah.
Yeah. I met her when we were both in Jerusalem. She was at the time Christoph's assistant. She was learning how to teach. And well, after class, we decided to have our own reading group of Plato. And that's basically how I started reading and discussing an original text in the target language. So yeah, I'm really happy that we had planned this, or we had mentioned that we want to do one summer school in Greece a long time ago, and finally we're doing it. It's going to be 1 week, not much, from the 28th of July to the August the 3rd. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the information is on my website, which is still under construction. So
Yeah, but just looking at it, I see you've got you know, times in classes and reading and discussion times and some various field trips too. So Mycenae and some archaeology sites and things too.
yeah, yeah,
So
we want to go there to how do you say in English? Mycenae. I'm really bad at saying Greek things in English.
well, we could probably just say them in Greek, hopefully.
Mycenae, yeah,
Yeah.
and also to Epidauros. We want to watch their
Hmm.
a Greek play,
Oh,
and we'll
cool.
be reading Greek myths and also their interpretation by either or ancient or late antiquity or Byzantine writers. Like what we still need to decide exactly because there's a lot of material, but that's the idea.
Yeah. Well, that sounds really interesting.
And yeah, let's see how it goes. I mean, there are a lot of other summer schools. There's one uh, also in the States, like an Homeric camp by what's the name? Ancient Languages Institute. So
Okay.
there are many things going on, and that's great for for everyone learning Greek.
But the one you guys are doing, it sounds like you'll be in Greece, and there's nothing like being able to put your feet and hands in places where these things happened
Yeah,
and see the
yeah,
texts in the
yeah,
places they were talking about or they're produced. That there's a um,
yeah,
something to be
absolutely.
said
I
for
mean,
that.
yeah, absolutely. And also on the on top of that is that there are also many things that you can still hear or recognize in when you're walking there and see that people still do in modern Greece.
Mm.
So that's also a plus that I like. I mean, and being able to swim, it's also great.
Yeah, I like to swim too, and I don't think I've ever got to swim in the Mediterranean, but the times I've seen it, it looks beautiful.
Yeah, I wish you could come. I mean, you need to once at least. Let me know, and
Yeah, well, one of these
you have
days, who
already
knows?
things planned. You're going to be teaching Latin, right? You told me.
In the fall, yes. That's just tutoring with some my daughter and some of her
Mm.
friends and things. But it's an excuse to finally get my Latin up to some kind of competency. So,
Great.
um, like Greek, I started that with a grammar translation method, and then, have forgotten most of it. But it really is amazing how working through a good text like Orberg,
Hmm.
just, I know I can't, I'm writing it, I'm writing the exercises by hand, and I'm copying the text by hand mostly. And, even I know like the words I know it's pretty small, but I'm the grammar he's taught so far, like I'm really comfortable with, and the words come easily because I've been, because it's a really great textbook, and I'm taking the time to hand copy it, and I think that really helps.
Yeah,
And
definitely. I agree. Yeah. The process of I don't know, putting the information from your brain through your hands on the paper, I think that makes things stick better.
and I remember reading, Paul Nation from was it is it University of I forget the university he's at in New Zealand, but he has a free PDF book that he wrote. You can get off his website about it's like what do I need to learn a language, and he lists a
Mhm.
bunch of really great, really great exercise or activities you can do and apply in your language learning routines. And one of those was like basically read, say, do, or whatever he calls it. And so it's like I'll try to read the text and then or read the sentence from lingua latina and then you know, not look at it and then say, or like read it, say it, and then not look at it and try to write it from memory. And just that, I found that process to be really helpful.
Ah,
And
great.
obviously, we could do that with Greek just as
Hmm.
well. Although getting all the accent marks in the right places might be a bit of a pain. But I think even doing that, like that, writing by hand is a great way to learn where accents go, um, and get comfortable with that. So, anyway,
Yeah, I think at the beginning, I mean, also in Latin accents can be sometimes not that clear. For example, for me as a Spanish speaker, sometimes I mispronounce the accents in Latin because I do the accentuation according to Spanish,
hmm,
which changes sometimes. But well, I mean, that can happen too in Latin. But in Greek, yeah, perhaps at the beginning is going to be um, challenging, but it's a great way of actually learning where the accents go and feeling more comfortable with uttering the the language.
yeah, and that's I know there's many debates about pronunciation as it comes to Greek, and I think that to some extent depends on what period you want to, period of Greek you want to focus on. But for me, I find it helpful to try and uh, pronounce the accents, a circumflex as a rising and falling tone, just for myself, so that when I'm trying to write or whatever, I'm have something I can hear to associate with that, so I can differentiate mentally between an acute and a circumflex accent. Um, but
Yeah,
different people have different opinions, and
yeah.
um,
I mean,
so
of course, you can do that. You could do that also with modern pronunciation, but
yeah,
the thing you lose that. How would you call it? The awareness. And I think that by doing precisely what you do, you create like you're reflecting the written language with the some pronunciation, and you create more awareness of, uh, hey, there's something different here.
yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
yeah, and like you said, you can do that. You can pronounce the accents over really any pronunciation scheme you want to use, modern or Erasmian or Lucian or whatever.
Hmm.
And I think Carla Hurt actually has a really great tutorial on one of her YouTube videos about how to pronounce the different accents, which
Yeah.
is pretty.
I liked her video. Yeah, I think it's very well done and explains it very well, and also how to do it and the reasons. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think the video for getting used to the tones, the pitch in Greek. Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about comprehensible input using Byzantine texts, and I do have a follow-up question I want to ask about that in a little bit. And then so we talked about that. We've talked about the Byzantine audio library that you're pulling
Hmm.
together, and the summer school. Um, you're also going to be offering reading groups and classes online as well, right?
Yeah. Oh. But that I'm going to offer just. I'm going to be teaching only Saturdays. Also to I don't know to keep practicing
Mhm.
teaching like in a class doing this using this method, but only Saturdays. I have two um, private students that I'm working with, but that will be it. The rest will be colleagues that will be teaching. There's
Okay.
Miguel, my friend from Colombia, who's teaching Atenace right now. And I don't know, later, I don't know who else. I mean, if someone is interested in teaching and needs a platform, I mean, do write me an email and we can arrange something and let's see. Yeah, because I think there's a lot of talent out there also.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I imagine you also said you were teaching at a university and you're working a PhD. So I imagine just with the other activities, your teaching time for teaching online is quite limited. So,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. That, yeah. But
so I'm
mhm,
curious, what's your dissertation topic on?
it's didactic poem on logic, Byzantine poem on logic. It's kind of an introduction to Aristotle.
Hmm.
There was one philosopher from late antiquity called Porphyry. He wrote an introduction. That's the name of the book, Isagogi or Isagoge, to Aristotle's categories, and was like the handbook for logic for 1,000 years. Every student who wanted to start learning philosophy needed to start by this book. But in the 12th century, there was a poet, a writer called Johannes Tzetzes, or yeah, Johannes Tzetzes, or Johannes Tzetzes. He wrote a paraphrasis, or he changed this introduction of Porphyry into a poem. So that's
Hmm.
one of the, for example, of these resources that was created in Byzantine times for making things more appealing in a more with the vocabulary is not that complicated. They repeat a lot. There's the rhythm. So that's the my dissertation is basically preparing a critical edition of this poem that it has not so far it exists only in two manuscripts.
Okay.
Yeah. So
So
yeah, that's what's taking most of my time. But mhm.
yeah, I imagine that would. So here's my follow-up question.
Mhm.
If people want to read Plato or Homer, I mean, you go to Perseus, you go to Skyphia, um, yeah, there's tons of resources for those, right? It's easy. They're pretty easy to find.
Mhm.
Um, where do you go to find these Byzantine texts? Is it all in libraries? Is any of this stuff digitized? Or, are there scanned PDFs at least? How do we find this stuff if somebody wanted to take a look at what we've been talking about?
Yeah, that's sometimes a problem with the Byzantine literature. As I mentioned, I mean, most of us started learning Greek and Latin because of this interest for classical antiquity. So many of these texts are disregarded, and there are some editions you can find them on archive.org, but they are like old and made in the 17th, 18th century, and sometimes they just made this edition from one manuscript. So they are not like proper um, critical editions. And they did it because sometimes also because they used Byzantine literature as means for classical text. So they only cared about this Byzantine author mentioned here Plato, and then the rest is like really not so well done in the editions. That happens. There's a lot of them. You can also find them in this TLG, but
Okay.
I guess you need to pay for that
Yeah.
because they are not in the free version of the in the TLG canon. Hmm. Yeah,
Yeah. That's that's one of the problems.
yeah, that's one of the problems. Yes, I think in this case there's a lot of philological work that needs to be done. Um, I mean, for new editions of Plato, there's really no point of, I'd say, but there are many texts that are just there as manuscripts in one library waiting to be edited. So that's also a good opportunity for us for someone if is interested in philology.
Hmm.
There's a lot of work to do there.
So, for example, if I wanted to look for one of these things that you mentioned, like that, one of the poems, like I think you mentioned John's. That's right. So there was a on archive. There was a Gospel of John with Homeric. Um,
Yeah, that's already there. That's on archive.org. I think that edition is made in the 19th century by a German scholar. There's a new edition by quite recent by Italian philologist Paolo Cesaretti, I think, but that's not online. That's
hmm.
that's a pity.
Okay. So that's not out yet.
No, but I mean the one done in the 19th century by this German scholar, I don't remember his name, is quite good, and you
Okay.
can find that on archive. If you, I can send you the link later if you want to add this, perhaps um, to the episode of this podcast.
Yeah, that would be a good starting point. Um, so TLG, the Source Lingua Graecae has some things and archive.
Mm-hmm.
Um, okay.
The TLG, if you have access to the full corpus, you will find there everything.
Okay.
Uh, I I mean I have access to this TLG through my university, so I'm not aware actually of how much it
Hmm.
costs. But I don't know. Um, yeah, I mean it would depend how much it costs.
Yeah, I'll have to look at that. I don't remember how much their subscription is.
I know it's cheaper than the Thesaurus Linguae Latinae. That's the only thing I know. But
Yeah, let's
yeah.
see. For an individual, it is. No, I don't know. It's not clear from their website, so
No?
or maybe it is. I don't know. I can't find it. Anyway, oh, $140 a year. So that's
Okay.
it's cheaper than Netflix or cheaper than some things, I guess.
Yeah, that's true. Good.
But
Not yeah, it's not that expensive. Well, but also I mean as because the other question would be like, okay, you have access to this, but then what can you read? You have
yeah,
the Byzantine authors are not well known. So that's also one of the things that I want to do with this Byzantine audio library, like to to promote, let's say, and to make known different authors and their style and so on.
that makes sense. Well, I think this is all really interesting. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what you come up with, and maybe others will be inspired to join this project. This sounds like something that would be a uh, good fodder for the Greek Learner Text project to help digitize some of these PDFs into um, digital forms for learners and things. So um, maybe
What's
that'll
what the thing you mentioned, the Greek what?
Greek Learner Text project.
Yeah,
Um,
I think I'm not aware of that.
well, so if you, it's something I've been a part of for a while. James Tauber is the main organizer, if you know him.
Yeah. And
Um,
Ferguson? No, what? I don't remember. Okay, yeah.
So yeah, there's a bunch of people. It's not an official organization or anything. It's just there's a Discord channel, which if you're interested in, and we can get you in, people can join that if they want to contribute to creating, like digitizing or creating tools for Greek learner text. So right now they have some editions of Plato and the Apostolic Fathers and some of the other like 18th, 19th century textbooks
Hmm.
um, that, were produced like Roos's A Greek Boy at Home.
Hmm.
We've got a digitization of that. And, like for a lot of that, we built in the Alphaeus reading tools too. So, there's the text is available on GitHub if somebody wanted to grab it and make something out of it. But then for many of the things, there's a nice website, HTML version you can read that has Alphaeus built in. So you can just double click or long press, and there's some glossing and parsing tools to
Yeah, I
help
think
people.
I used you made one of the grammar of the name of
Grax.
yeah, exactly. You made that version, right?
Yes, I digitized. Actually, I think that was already digitized, but I added some stuff to it.
Yeah, I
So,
remember. Yeah, I went through that. Yeah, and I recommended it to one student. Yes, yes, I know now what you're talking about. Yeah, yeah, great. I'll check that again because I had forgotten completely about that.
and there's some exciting things going on over there. Some new people joining and things. So, but yeah, I think what you're doing sounds like, maybe as some of these texts, as people find PDFs and things, then Greek Learn Text could help digitize them and things. So anyway,
Interesting. Yeah, great. Um, we need to. Well, we'll stay in touch, and I'll check that again, and let's see what can come out from there. Or what can we, I don't know, merge or do
yeah,
together.
that
Great.
sounds good. Well, Rogelio, thank you again for being on the podcast. It's really cool to hear what you're talking about, and you have some really cool ideas. That'll be great for learners. If people want to stay in touch and follow your work, the best way to do that is through your website. Is that correct?
Yeah, through my website. Yeah.
So that's Rogerus Byzantinus,
Byzantinos, exactly. Yeah.
which I'll have in the show notes. So great.
Thanks again for giving me the time to talk. And well, it was great talking to you and discussing um, learning methods or how to apply them.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Intro and outro music is Funky Thanksgiving by Admiral Bob, used with gratitude under a Creative Commons 3.0 attribution license. The track can be found at dig.ccmixer.org.